All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm going to tell you a little bit about compound extensions. And for those that are not familiar, I'll tell you about Compound, which is a really exciting DeFi protocol. So I'm Adam Bavosa. I am the developer relations lead at Compound Labs. I help developers out with building their projects on top of Compound. And you can find me on Twitter, or you can find me in the Compound Discord. I answer all kinds of technical questions, anything software related or technical concepts related, I can help you out. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Compound protocol, the difference between Compound v2 and Compound v3, the protocol's governance. I'll tell you about extensions, which is the new exciting thing, and I'll give you some developer resources, so if you're a programmer, you can get started building an extension right away. So what is Compound? I work at Compound Labs. We're the authors of the Compound protocol. And it's a protocol made up of several smart contracts running on Ethereum mainnet since early 2018. And our mission is to create efficient algorithmic money markets. So what gets me excited to work in the DeFi space is that we build and continue to steward free and open crypto protocols that anyone can use anywhere in the world. So this is an incredibly huge amount of people that could use protocols like Compound. So you can think about the banked, the underbanked, and the unbanked. That includes everybody on Earth. So it's a huge market for people that can use DeFi for their benefit. So if you think about it, everyone with a smartphone on Earth that has an internet connection can use DeFi, can use Compound. So historically, we've seen interest rates as high as 15% APY on USDC, as well as other supported assets. And I love that what we're doing is different from TradFi because it's like a completely open, transparent systems, not opaque like what you get with TradFi. And you get decentralization, transparency, and that's what gets me excited to work in the DeFi space. So what is the protocol? Simply put, it is crypto asset money markets. We refer to it as the Compound protocol, and it runs on Ethereum, soon to be other chains, very, very soon to be other chains. It is decentralized, which I'll explain how shortly. And the main use case is it allows users to earn interest on their crypto, or they can permissionlessly borrow other cryptocurrencies. So instead of an asset like Ethereum or USDC sitting idle in your wallet, you can earn interest, a varying interest rate, and users can supply crypto and borrow other crypto against that collateral. So the interest that suppliers earn is driven by the interest that borrowers pay. So those are the two basic uses of the protocol, supplying and borrowing. It can support crypto assets that are tokenized on EVM blockchains as ERC20 assets. And it can be deployed to any EVM chain. And last week, the first deployment on Polygon was deployed. It is yet to be initialized. It will be initialized through governance if the vote is yes, which we'll see hopefully this week. So very exciting. So again, it allows suppliers to earn a varying interest rate, and borrowers can borrow other crypto against collateral. So an individual that uses a dApp like with the ones listed on the Compound homepage at compound.finance, or they can code their own feature to use the protocol. And users or organizations that use these interfaces can earn interest, or borrow assets, or participate in governance. So use cases we see in crypto are crypto wallet applications that want to allow their users to earn interest. And also, any business that holds funds for a period of time, they can use the protocol to supply and earn that interest income for that period where they're just having assets sit, so they can create some income that way. So I'll go over a little bit of an example. So let's say you have use one of the many interfaces for Compound, and you supply assets. When a supplier supplies, they get a fixed amount of C tokens, and you can think of those like a code check for your underlying assets. And as time progresses, more underlying can be redeemed for the same amount of C tokens in V2. So you can think of it like interest accrues to the C token holder. So say you supply 1 Ether, you get a certain amount of C tokens, and later you can redeem the C tokens for more than 1 Ether. So interest accrues to the C token holder. So that's the V2 style. In V3, the C tokens are minted for only one type of asset. So that's the base asset, not for collateral assets. So if you're familiar with V2, all collateral assets earn interest, but in V3, only one asset per deployment. The asset that you supply is, you get a C token that's 1-to-1, and that's rebasing. So V2 C tokens, you get this like very large amount that's like 50-to-1, and with V3, you get 1-to-1 that rebases. So there's many more differences between V2 and V3. I'll explain later. Assets are stored in smart contracts that no individual controls. There's on-chain governance system that I'll cover a bit later. And C tokens are redeemable at any time. So users can supply for as little as 1 Ethereum block. So interest accrues every single block. So you can earn interest for supplying for literally 12 seconds, like 1 block. So this enables on-demand supplying and borrowing in the protocol. No permissions needed, no need to wait for a lockup period. You can earn interest for supplying for like just 1 minute. So that's pretty cool. It's something you get only in DeFi, not in TradFi. So the protocol enables over-collateralized borrowing of assets. So a user must supply collateral before they can borrow, and they can borrow up to a certain USD value of their collateral. So you can only borrow less than that value, so you can't borrow more than the collateral value you have. So an example would be like you supply Rapid Coin or Ether or one of the many others, and you can borrow DAI or USDC such that your account is over-collateralized. So the limit of the borrow depends on the collateral asset that you supply. Different collaterals have different collateral factors, and those are all decided by the community based on their trust in that asset, the price fluctuations. So that's completely chosen by humans. And in order to borrow, you must supply a supported collateral to the protocol first, and then you can borrow any asset, and it accrues interest to the borrower side. So in V2, borrowers earn interest on their supplied asset just like a supplier does. However, the borrowed interest accrues as well. And in V3, when you supply collateral, it does not earn interest. So those are two distinct differences of V2 and V3. So if an account becomes under-collateralized, like when the USD value of the collateral goes down, or too much borrower interest has accrued to the borrower, the account is not properly collateralized, and it can be liquidated. So the user's C tokens of collateral can be clawed back to the protocol, and a liquidator will perform a liquidation, and they're incentivized to do that. So supplying only is safer than borrowing. There's no risk of liquidation. So there is, of course, smart contract risk. And yeah, so suppliers only see much less risk, so they don't have to worry about liquidation. So liquidators keep the protocol safe. They keep the protocol collateralized, and they're incentivized to do that. Borrowers that become under-collateralized can become liquidated, and they'll lose some or all of their collateral in that process. And due to the autonomous nature of the protocol, liquidation system is very harsh compared to traditional finance. There's no negotiating, there's no phone call. You just look, and 1 Ethereum block, you got liquidated. So that's part of the trade-off with DeFi versus TradFi. So here are the 18 supported assets in Compound V2. These can be supplied as interest earning, so you can supply them and earn interest. Some of them, not all of them, can be used as collateral, but all of them can be used to borrow. So you can borrow any of these assets or earn interest on any of these assets. So I'll explain the differences now between that and Compound 3. Compound 3 was released at the end of last year. I think it was August last year. So this version of the protocol is much more gas efficient, much more capital efficient, and it streamlines the most popular use case of Compound V2, which is supplying a volatility priced asset like, say, perhaps Bitcoin or Ether, and then borrowing a stably priced asset like USDC or DAI. So this version has additional safety for liquidations, higher threshold for the same collateral factor. So you can borrow the same amount in V3, and you'll get liquidated at a later time. You can use your collateral more efficiently. So the liquidation point is separated in V3. So in V2, the collateral factor is you borrow that maximum amount, you can get liquidated the next block. But in V3, the collateral factor and the liquidation factor are separate, and the liquidation factor is always higher. So you can have this point where you borrow the maximum amount, and then there's this like sort of no new borrows period before you would get liquidated. So you could always top off your supplied collateral, or you could repay your borrow before that point. But yeah, that's just one change to the protocol that makes it a little bit safer for borrowers. So currently there are 2 deployments of Compound 3 that are initialized. There's a USDC base asset deployment and a WETH deployment. And those are on Ethereum mainnet. There are more deployments to come soon. There is a USDC version on Polygon that is yet to be initialized. It'll be initialized through governance, hopefully very soon. And this version of the protocol is able to be on any EVM chain. So this is sort of like fulfilling that wish for a multi-chain world. Compound V2 is only running on Ethereum mainnet, and it's designed for Ethereum mainnet. Can't be safely run on other chains. Code would have to be changed, but with the same code base, this can run on L2s as long as they're EVM. So key differences are V2 is, well, V3 has less risk, less gassiness than V2, and it can be deployed anywhere that Solidity is supported. And V2, you can borrow any supported asset, but in V3, you can only borrow one base asset. So currently that's WETH or USDC. V2 and V3 coexist. V2 is not going anywhere. You can't delete those smart contracts. There's no deprecation schedule. And because the use case of V2 is slightly different and somewhat, it's different from V3, there's still high volumes of liquidity there, high volumes of users. So we see that people are definitely using V2 and V3 in a harmonious fashion. So here are the major differences. So for developers, this is something that you'd have to think about a little more often. When you supply an asset to Compound V2, you get about 50 to 1 in C tokens. That number is always changing as the block height increases. So with V3, you get something that's a little more simple. You just get 1-1. So you supply 50 USDC, you get 50 C USDC V3. And that rebases. So the amount in the holding address, it'll go up as the timestamp increases. So V3 has a little bit more use of timestamps instead of block heights. In V2, you can borrow any asset that the protocol supports, and in V3, you can borrow only the base asset. Currently, that's USDC in one deployment and WETH in another deployment. So V2 it's just one giant system that has many assets. And V3, there is a single base asset per deployment. The liquidity is encapsulated within each deployment. So V3 deployments do not depend on each other. They're completely encapsulated. V2 is just one deployment on Ethereum mainnet. And V3 can be deployed on any EVM chain. And hopefully within a short time frame, we'll see Compound 3 running on many, many EVM chains and see lots of people using them to supply and borrow. In Compound V2, the max borrow and liquidation are the same. So if you try and borrow the maximum amount based on the collateral you've supplied in V2, you will get liquidated in the next block. And this has happened many times before. People get very upset. Why did I just get liquidated immediately? So in V3, that's not possible. V3, you borrow that maximum amount, and you have this like no new borrows period. Well, I guess it is possible to get liquidated in the next block, but there would have to be a drastic price movement within that time. But overall, for the users, it's safer in practice. So there's a separate max borrow and liquidation point, separate factors that are chosen by the community. V2, you can earn interest on any supported asset. V3, it's just the base asset. So you supply WETH, you supply USDC, you earn interest. Some assets are non-valid collateral in Compound V2. So say you supply Tether, you cannot borrow against your Tether. Community does not find that asset to be safe as collateral. So V3, all of the collaterals that are supported are valid collateral. You can borrow against them. The comp distribution mechanism in V2 is integrated into the comptroller contract, which is kind of cumbersome because the comptroller has other duties. This programming practice of multi-purpose instead of single purpose is a little bit cumbersome. That contract often hits the deploy limit when we're trying to upgrade it. So it's just created a bunch of issues, kind of just like shoehorning this thing into this contract where it originally wasn't designed for that. However, V3, there's a completely separate rewards contract that can be used for any reward token, really, if you want. So comp is being distributed to the users of V3 via that separate rewards contract. So that's a new feature. Just came out recently, just voted on by the community recently. And V2, we have one account controller, which is your, the single account, which could be a smart contract or an EOA. But in V3, this is a really awesome feature that also enables compound extensions, which I'll also explain shortly. You can enable account managers. So say you're supplying from account 0xA, you can approve 0xB to be a manager on behalf of 0xA. So that way you can have an aggregate account that controls, say, a bunch of other users' accounts. If you have some kind of system where you're using the protocol as infrastructure, you can use this management system to create your own apps, your own protocols. So it just opens many doors for developers, makes the protocol better infrastructure to develop on. So that's a big jump from V2 to V3. Very exciting feature value add. So if you're not familiar, I'll explain governance a little bit. Governance is community-owned infrastructure. The protocol contracts are owned by a governor contract, which is controlled by the comp token holders. The comp token is issued to users of the protocol and is slowly dripped from the comptroller in V2 or the rewards contract in V3. Once users have the comp token, they can create governance proposals that are literally on-chain code changes, or they can vote yes or no on those changes. So someone makes a proposal to change a collateral factor or add a new asset as collateral. All of the comp token holders can vote on that proposal yes or no. After the outcome of that vote comes through, if it's a success, the contracts will literally execute on-chain change based on that voting. So completely on-chain system, super cool. Been that way since June of 2020. And the community creates those proposals, discusses them openly in public, in Discord, as well as the forums at comp.xyz. So like I said, comp tokens are distributed to users of the protocol. You supply or borrow, comp is slowly dripped to your address, and you could use that comp to vote or create governance proposals. The governance process takes roughly 7 days. First 2 days, everyone can see what the heck this proposal does. Do I need to make changes to my protocol because I depend on Compound? Do I need to make changes to my app? Do I like this proposal? Do I trust it? If find it out in that 2 days, and then there's 3 days to vote. So comp token holders can vote yes or no for 3 days. Once the voting window has concluded, yes or no, succeeds, goes into the time lock. There's 2-day waiting, so any developers that use the protocol's infrastructure can make changes to their app based on these changes soon to be upgraded. And after that 2-day waiting period, the execution button is hit by anybody. Anybody can hit that button, just call that public function, and the code literally changes of the protocol, and successful governance proposal. So here is the very cool part, extensions. The app at app.compound.finance, that domain is owned by Compound Labs. We have a starter app there. We encourage developers to build more apps that are like it to further increase decentralization. The protocol is completely open. Anybody can build their own app that connects to it, but extensions sort of makes that even more accessible. So at that domain, app.compound.finance, you can go there and go to /extensions, and you see a new place where little applets can run within the Compound starter app. So say you're a community developer, you're building some kind of app that allows automated safety on accounts that are borrowing. So if we're getting close to a point of liquidation, you can run some automation that saves the account, tops off the collateral, or repays the borrow, or sends a text message to the user. You can add that applet to the Compound extensions interface. So once you're in that interface, you get all those eyeballs of all of those users that are using app.compound.finance, and they can find your app. It's great for discovery, and also great for showing that your app is not a scam app. We're not going to list any of those, obviously. So yeah, this is a lot of value add for the community. A lot of the apps that we do not have time to integrate ourselves, we let the community come and build their own, insert them into our interface. Boom, you have your own extension. So these icons here are of the 4 existing extensions at the moment. One of them is a advanced transactions. There it is, advanced transactions. So what that allows is multiple steps in the protocol in a single transaction. So say you're a user that wants to supply an asset, supply another asset, borrow an asset, take that asset and then supply it again. Do something crazy like that. You can use advanced transactions, and it will do all of those steps in a single transaction. So you can save on gas, it's more efficient, easier for those atomic operations that might not work if you do it over several blocks. So advanced transactions, that one is available in the extensions interface. Anyone can build something like that. That's something that we happen to build, so we inserted it into extensions. Position migrator. If you have a position on Compound v2, you want to move to Compound v3, or you have a position on Aave, you want to move to Compound v3, you can use that migrator tool at your own risk, by the way. It's a smart contract that will move your position on your behalf from v2 to v3. So that one's cool. Comp.vote is a completely separate sort of concept. It just enables voting on Compound proposals. So you get a gasless, free way to vote. You sign a transaction with your wallet, you spend no gas. Later, that is posted on chain by a very generous community member who spends all the ETH to publish those on chain. So somebody built that applet, actually college kid, it was really awesome. I use it every time I want to vote because I don't want to pay gas. So comp.vote is an extension inserted into the interface. It was a standalone app at comp.vote, https://comp.vote. It was able to be inserted into the extensions interface using a nice little shim, just a few lines of code. So if you have an existing app you want to insert into the extensions interface, you can use our shim. Some nice, tight, neat little code there. And DeFi Saver, you may have heard of them. They took their app and did that. They shimmed it into Compound extensions, so people can go in there and manage their position that way. A little bit safer with automation. So that's what it looks like. You have the Compound header at the top, so if you've used app.compound.finance, that looks familiar. And then this is sort of like an iframe inside of that page. And you could insert an app there using a shim, or you could build one from scratch. And lucky for you developers, I wrote a developer guide. It's available on the forums. You can follow step by step on how to build your own Compound extension there. Or you can use the shim to take an existing app and put it into the extensions interface. This is what the position migrator looks like. This is also, again, an iframe. So you can't really tell because the styling is nice and integrated there. So this uses smart contracts. It captures the Web3 provider that the window's using. So users come to app.compound.finance. They approve the page to use their wallet. And then immediately, as a developer, you can use that Web3 provider inside of your extension. So it's sort of like this nice place to get your app moving in the Compound interface. How do I get started? You can go over to any of these resources, docs.compound.finance. That's where all of the smart contract documentation is, SDK documentation, contract addresses, links to developer guides that are blogs. You can find them there, docs.compound.finance. You need help, you can come ask questions in Discord. I will answer your question, or another community member will. You can go over to the Medium blog, medium.com/compound-finance. Developer guides there as well as concepts explained. So if you're not a developer, you can learn concepts there. And then we have 2 GitHub orgs. The compound-finance org has all of the protocol code, and then compound-developers has developer education materials. So you can check that out, get in touch with me. I'll help you build your extension, get exposure to your app. As long as it adds to the Compound ecosystem, you can create an extension, and it's a win-win. That's all I got. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. We have a few minutes. I'm happy to take questions if anybody has a question. Yes.
Hi. This is Michelle from Map Protocol. I have a quick question. So when we build extension on Compound, will Compound do the code auditing and etc. before
Can you talk a little louder, please?
Will Compound, because it's a Compound extension, when we build that extension, will you do some actual auditing work before you let it listed?
Yes, that's a good question. So our engineering team will take a look at the code of any extension that's built, make sure that it's not malicious in any way. In order to make a pull request, you'd have to show the code that you want to deploy to our domain. We'll take a look. We won't necessarily make sure that it's safe, but we'll make sure that it's not malicious. Extensions are for use by users at your own risk. So I hope that answers your question. If we don't have any questions now, of course, you could find me around the conference. You could find me on Discord, compound.finance/Discord. You'll find me in there. You could ask me questions in the public channels. Happy to help out. Thanks, everybody, for listening. If you have an idea for an extension, definitely get in touch with me.